Minneapolis is burning. And it's getting pretty bad out there.
Y'all are youth. What does it feel like to be youth out here?
It's bad, bro. Well, white people, bro. They bad as bro. Like, bro. We browns and blacks united, bro. Blacks and browns united.
And it's spreading. There's been violence in other major cities as well, and we might see violence hit the suburbs.
Like, it's real bogus. They got to get it right. I mean, otherwise, this was going to happen. And ain't nothing left here, so when we start coming to the suburbs, when we come to the government center, then what y'all going to do? You see what I'm saying? So,
strangely, a lot of the rioters seem to be hitting up Target. Wait, go back to that. They're in the self-checkout. But speaking of Target, there was this lady in the wheelchair. Did you see this? This woman, she was putting her wheelchair in the doorway of Target, holding a knife, and trying to keep looters from ransacking the Target. Here, I have the video clip. She's in the doorway, and as this lady is trying to maneuver her stolen goods through the doorway, the wheelchair lady moves her wheelchair in the way so they can't get out the door. And then they hit her with the fire extinguisher. And then you can see some people in the crowd who are throwing some stuff at her. I can't tell what they're throwing or even if they're hitting her or not. And in this next clip, she's using her legs or her wheelchair to try and hold the cart full of stolen stuff so it can't be carried off. I also found this clip of her. This one is actually night. She looks pretty beat up at this point. I think this woman in her wheelchair spent all day trying to stop the looting that was happening. You know, and it's shocking. If she wasn't bound to a wheelchair, they might have been a lot more rough on her. They might have, you know, well, I don't know what shape she would have ended up in, but it probably would have been worse. But before we talk about the riots more, let's talk about what led up to the riots. Ultimately, this started on May 25th, when there was a video posted of George Floyd on the ground with an officer, Derek, who had his knee on the back of George's neck. George died later in the hospital. Now, these two guys, Derek and George, they used to be co-workers. We don't know if there's any bad blood or whatever is going on there. We'll have to wait to find out. The next day, the Hennepin County Medical Examiner conducted an autopsy. The autopsy is still not yet released, but the preliminary finding from the autopsy doesn't support asphyxiation or strangulation. The preliminary finding says potential intoxicants in his system likely contributed to his death. So the knee thing might not have killed him. It may have contributed. We'll have to see sort of later on. But ultimately, that's not important, right? This unrest, these protests, these riots, this all started before the preliminary autopsy results were known, right? So no matter what the autopsy ends up saying, no matter if Derek gets charged, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison, none of this matters because they're burning down buildings right now, right? This has nothing to do with what's going to happen to Derek. Now, on the 26th, which is the same day that the autopsy was performed, the mayor of Minneapolis stood up. And he needed to give us all some sort of message about what was going on. And of course, you know, he's a mayor, so he's going to give us a basic reasonable message like, don't worry, everyone. We're going to bring this to court and make sure an impartial judge and jury reviews the facts and punishes any wrongdoing, right? Oh, wait, that's not what he said?
Being black in America should not be a death sentence. For 5 minutes, we watched as a white officer pressed his knee into the neck of a black man.
What? This guy is insane. Not only is he basically saying, hey, he was killed because he was black, which the mayor does not know when he says that. He says that being black is a death sentence in America, but it shouldn't be. I would have a hard time actually coming up with something more inflammatory to say. If I wanted to stoke resentment in the black community, if I wanted to make blacks angry against whites, if I wanted to cause riots, What would be better to say than this? This is perfect. This is the most extreme position that you can sort of believe in terms of racial conflict. And it's supported by the mayor. It's actually similar to LeBron James. LeBron James made that tweet after the Ahmaud Arbery thing. He said that black people are hunted down and killed every time they step outside the house. Obviously, this is an insane position. Very few people at all believe it. If you believed that you were genuinely hunted the moment you left your house, well, for one, you probably wouldn't leave your house much. But the mayor is saying this. He's saying that being black is a sentence to death. From who? Well, from whites, really. He's saying, hey, blacks, white people want you dead, and they're going to make it happen. The mayor told an entire race of people that they are in a struggle for survival against the whites. Nice work, mayor. At least you got those riots you wanted. But let's keep in mind, while the mayor apparently wants to see his own citizens harmed in riots, he's not telling them something they don't kind of believe already, right? This isn't a new idea. The mayor didn't come up with it. LeBron James didn't come up with it. This kind of riot was bound to come up. It's been building for a long time. Race has been a bigger and bigger and bigger issue as time has moved forward. Houston is rioting. Atlanta is rioting. New York is rioting. Do you think Scottsdale, Arizona is safe? Quick, someone check on Boise, Idaho. Well, those cities are 1% black, so, you know, there's nothing happening there. Now, let's look at these riots.
Shoot the white folks! Shoot the white folks!
Shoot the white folks? Geez, I would hate to be a white person in Minneapolis. But don't worry, MSNBC is here to tell us all about it.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Oh, see, it's not that unruly, he says while the city burns behind him. Thank you, MSNBC. Hey, by the way, was that lady shouting, shoot the white folks? Does she also work for MSNBC? You know, a lot of businesses are getting hit hard in these riots. Some of them are getting hit harder than others. Now, if you've got a business, I hope you're black. You got to put up the sign, just like this, black-owned business. You also have these minority-owned. That might not be as safe as black-owned, but, you know, it might help. Might as well try it. Keep in mind, when the fires start, sometimes, well, they just spread, right? The flames don't stop for a black-owned sign. And in this sort of chaotic environment that mobs can devolve into, mob mentality takes over and, you know, people might stop reading the signs at some point. But for now, those signs do help. And, you know, you'll go talk to someone about all this stuff that's happening now, and they'll mention to you, hey, you know, some of the rioters are white. And you know what? They're right. As I talked about in my video on white guilt, many far-left whites are an identifiable group that actually dislikes their own race. In fact, they're one of the only identifiable groups that dislikes their own race. The fact that a bunch of whites who hate the white race also show up to anti-white race riots, that doesn't make this any less about race. Most of these extreme left white people go under the label of anti-fascist or antifa. So you have sort of the BLM, you have the Black Lives Matter crowd, which is black, and then you have the white far left group, the antifa. And it's these two groups together, right? And here you can see a couple of tweets about black-owned businesses. You can see Antifa in Minnesota, so these are the white leftists, working to make sure just white businesses are destroyed. I mean, this is fundamentally a race riot. It's about race. Anyone telling you different ultimately is covering up part of the truth, at least. Now, I'm just curious, for anyone who says this isn't racially motivated and this doesn't have anything to do with race, these riots, what would happen if you spray painted white-owned on a building during these riots? I'm just wondering, what do you think would happen? Now, as far as these anti-fascists go, they're just far-left, sort of insane communists. They call basically everything they don't like fascism. That's where they get the name anti-fascists. Now, maybe you've heard of Keith Ellison, Attorney General for Minnesota, Wikipedia says he's, quote, the first African-American elected to statewide office in Minnesota, as well as the first Muslim in the United States to win statewide office. Now, keep in mind, he was a Nation of Islam member, which is sort of this black nationalist religious outfit. They say a lot of not very nice things about white people. And Ellison is the state attorney general, and he's sort of the head of the Justice Department. Now, here's a picture of him with the anti-fascist handbook. So he really does represent everything we've seen with these riots. This sort of this black anti-white view and this anti-fascist far-left view working together against whites. But the thing is, he's like the guy who's supposed to be in charge of justice for the whole state. I mean, ultimately, both of these groups are operating on this narrative. The narrative is white police officers are out to kill blacks. But that's not just where it ends, right? Like the mayor said, white people are, as a whole, are out to kill blacks. Blacks have a death sentence. And you know what? At this point, they're done with it. Blacks are ready to fight back against the whites.
The third time, it's out. Now we go in the Cobbins house, and we gonna choke that out too. We gonna y'all up. Come on up. Matter of fact, we got a 2-for-1 rule. One of ours, 2 of yours. Innocent mother dying, cause y'all don't want none. There's more of us than you. What's up? Exactly. We coming for y'all. This is only the beginning, mother. What's up? Huh? Exactly. You speechless. Cause next time this is your mother house out there in Oakville. You don't live here, but we coming to your house right now. Don't out my face. Here you go, bro.
And listen, white people, you might not want to fight them. I get it. But they want to fight you. A war does not require both sides to fight, right? You don't get to invalidate a war by not fighting. If you don't fight, all you do is turn a war into a slaughter. If you don't fight when someone tries to come over the border, it's still an invasion. But ultimately, say goodbye to any city that is damaged enough by these riots. Any significant amount of damage that is done to these cities could put the city in decline. Do you remember Detroit? Detroit was, in its time, one of the most amazing cities in the world. It was called the Paris of the West. Now, after the race riots in 1967, it really tanked. Paris really got hurt, or Detroit really got hurt. It was never the same after that. Now, do you know why? Let me explain it to you this way. Let's say you lived in Minneapolis and you owned a business there. Now, you've seen with your own eyes at this point, rioters burn down a police station, loot stores, destroy cars. You've heard the mayor. You've heard the governor, you've heard the president talk. None of them have been talking about arresting the rioters and them receiving life sentences for destroying the city. Who here is talking about locking these people up and throwing away the key? None of them. So, when the time comes and you stand at the rubble of, whatever your house was or whatever your business was, when someone asks you, are you going to rebuild? You look down the street. And you see the faces of the people who destroyed your life. And guess what? They are still pissed. They still believe that they live in a racist society, an oppressive society. They still believe it needs to be torn down. You'd be an idiot to rebuild right next to them. And that's what happened in Detroit. Anyone who had any brains and enough money to uproot left. Some people had mortgages and whatnot. And guess what? Go talk to people about Detroit. Ask them, say, Detroit failed. What happened? Some people will occasionally tell you a story about a city that was too reliant on a single industry, the car industry. But mostly people will tell you the reason Detroit failed was white flight. Oh, so it was the racism of white people that destroyed Detroit, according to these people, not the blacks who burned down thousands of businesses. So that's the reality. Blacks can burn your city to the ground, and if the city does not get rebuilt, it is your fault. If white people don't rebuild it, it's the racism of white people that did that city away. So say goodbye to Minneapolis.